Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films. Do you ever have an idea and you think that would be a good idea, and then when the realisation of that idea sinks in, you think maybe that isn't such a good idea after all? Welcome to part 1 of my Alexandro Jodorowsky series. Today we're going to talk about Fando Elise, his 1968 debut feature. Jodorowsky, born in Chile, moved to Paris to study pretty much art in general. Studied under the Surrealist school, studied under mime with Marcel Marceau. Questions abound about Jodorowsky. Do his films speak the truth, or are they merely twaddle? Are his films profound or merely pretentious? Is he a genius or is he a charlatan? Is he a spiritual optimist or is he just naive? All and none of these questions will be answered during this video series. This Blu-ray edition features in Arrow's lovely box set of a few of his films, which I would highly recommend. Would say the print on this is absolutely beautiful, shot in black and white in 4:3 ratio. This one has a commentary by Jodorowsky. I mean, Jodorowsky is one of those guys that you can listen to all day. Again, whether you believe what he's saying is a completely different story. There's a new interview filmed in Paris, as Jodorowsky remembers, Fando Elise. There's a new introduction by Richard Pena, who's a professor of film studies at Columbia. I believe he does introductions on all the films in the set. And it has his 1957 short, his first, even though it's co-directed, Cravate, which means severed heads, which is an adaptation of Thomas Mann's The Transposed Heads, which I'll discuss briefly before Fando Elise. And it has the feature-length documentary La Constellation Jodorowsky by Louis Mouchette, which I believe I have seen before. So it's a wonderful package. Again, reversible artwork. So let's talk a little bit about Jodorowsky before we get to the films. Again, born in Chile, went to Paris, wanted to learn pretty much all the arts, was kind of bored of the Surrealist movement at that time because they were all about politics and they weren't quite as avant-garde or extreme as Jodorowsky would have liked. So he started a theatre group called Panic, in the Panic movement, with an author and a painter, and Fando Elise is based on that author's play, even though as far as the script is concerned, Jodorowsky pretty much just did a one-page summary of the play, so it's not as if it's a faithful adaptation or anything else. And the point of the Panic movement was to go further than Surrealism was going at that time. But like I said, he also studied mime with Marcel Marceau. So La Cravate, which is Technicolor from 1957, it's only 20 minutes long, and it's a lovely little piece about a shop that sells replacement heads. So this is like heads in jars decades before Futurama did it. Jean Cocteau was a fan of the film, apparently. and it stars Jodorowsky himself as a man who's unlucky with his current girlfriend and wants to change his head, but he falls for the girl who runs the shop. It's a delightful little story that features some little Jodorowsky touches. I won't go into spoilers. So that's Le Cravate, which is a nice little surprise having that included. So he then did a short in 1965, which isn't on this box set. And then he did Fando in 1968. So he wanted to continue the panic movement and make a film. So I think for this series, I'm not going to go into scene by scene analysis of Jodorowsky films, what the symbolism means, because I don't have a clue. I'm just going to pick out some images, because it's difficult with Jodorowsky, because a lot of the time with Jodorowsky films, you just have to watch them. You just have to witness the spectacle for the first time. So I'm not going to give too much away. Granted, as far as plot, it's hard to give that much away with Jodorowsky. So Fando Elise is essentially a road movie. Fando is the male character, Elise the female character, who seems to be paralysed or paraplegic. So he carts about in a cart, or drags her about. And it's about this journey of self-discovery, common theme in Jodorowsky films, to find the mythical city of Tar, or Tor, where you'll seek enlightenment and love. So again, even in this early Jodorowsky, his themes are all there that run through his work, through his career. So you have the theme of nature, the landscape, our relationship to nature and the landscape. You have mummy and daddy issues abound, as runs through his entire catalogue. You have drag queens and amputees. Of course, you'd be disappointed if you were watching a Jodorowsky film that didn't have amputees and drag queens. Again, and it has a search for enlightenment or the truth or spiritual meaning in the characters' lives. I would say one of the criticisms of Fando Elise are the main characters aren't as engaging as perhaps some of his other characters are. Jodorowsky himself only appears briefly as a puppet master. That's a long story. So I'm just going to pick out little phrases. Again, I can't go through every single image that's in the film, because some of them are breathtaking. Again, whether you like Jodorowsky films or don't, whether, like I say, you think he's a genius or just a pretentious fool, again, but he doesn't make films you forget, and that is a gift, because again, there's so many filmmakers and films that just go in one ear and out the other. Jodorowsky has a gift for making unforgettable images, even if you try and forget them. Takashi Miike is a bit like him. Whether his film's good or bad, sometimes he shows you something you haven't seen before, which again is a rare gift. You can tell in this film, because Jodorowsky was influenced by surrealism, there's a lot of L'Age d'Or, there's a lot of Louis Buñuel. I mean, he mentions Louis Buñuel himself, and Salvador Dali's probably less on Chien Andalou, but certainly there's a lot of L'Age d'Or in Fando Elise. There's also a lot of Fellini. Again, I'm not a huge Fellini expert, but my perception of Fellini, there's a certain Fellini influence. But I also think, projecting forward, David Lynch must have watched some Jodorowsky films in his time. Jodorowsky and Lynch are similar in the sense that they do seem to be driven by a muse that perhaps they can't explain in kind of concrete scientific terms. They're both driven by other forces, and I think they are both genuine in that sense. I don't think it's an act with either of them. Plus, there's a kind of thread of Dante's Inferno through the film as well. But there's certainly Brunel Dali through Fando Elise, which is fair enough because obviously Jodorowsky was heavily influenced by the Surrealist movement. But again, at that point in the 60s, he felt that Surrealism had kind of ran its course essentially, and he wanted something a bit more extreme to take things further. So, I mean, the film starts with an air raid siren and Lise lying in a bed eating a rose. And then there's the voiceover by Jodorowsky, that wonderful voice that he has, telling us about the myth of the city of tar. But just things that come to mind, I will have to refer to my notes. So there's like a burning piano, there's like a jazz band in ruins, there's an argument about wind, burnt out buildings, car wrecks, graveyards, reverse footage a few times. There's references to the Living Dead, and there is scenes where you have the Living Dead, 1968. That's quite interesting. 3 ladies playing cards, using fruit as currency that they feed to a man in his pants lying on a chaise lounge, and when they win a hand they get to feed him. Not making this up, you should know by now, it's Jodorowsky. There's a dominatrix with bowling balls, a plentiful supply of cow skulls, there's a dinner table in the desert with people have had a copious amount of food. They're all fairly overweight and they have funnels on their heads. I did not dream this. There's a little touch of vampirism. There's scissors at a funeral, and there's an amazing mixture with his mother, Fando's mother, with crosses and IVs. There's an amazing conversation at the start of the film with Fando and his father, Fando as a child, and they play a game of Imagine. And again, I'm going to have to refer to my notes, I apologise. But the father says, "Imagine I am a great pianist." And the son says, "What if I cut off your arm?" And the father says, "I'll become a great painter." And the son says, "Well, what if I cut off your other arm?" And he says, "I'll become a great dancer." And the son says, "Well, what if I cut off your legs?" And the father says, "I'll become a great singer." And the son continues by saying, "Well, what if I slit your throat?" And the father says, "When I am dead, my skin will become a beautiful drum." And the son says, "What if I burn that drum?" And the father says, "I will become a cloud that can take any shape." And the son says, "What if that cloud dissolves?" And the father says, "I will become rain that will make the grass grow." And the son says, "You win." I mean, it's kind of beautiful. It's kind of poetic. And that's what Jodorowsky's dialogue in his films in general are. Again, it's that he treads the line of profundity and pretentiousness. Again, you can make up your own mind where he lands, which side of the line he is on. This isn't David Mamet dialogue. This isn't Preston Sturges dialogue. This is something completely different. Again, he straddles that line, but sometimes his poetry, especially when he does the voiceover with that wonderful voice, strangely enough, there's a poetry to his dialogue at times that is both absurd and quite beautiful. And I think on a global scale that might sum up his films: absurd, but strangely beautiful. You know, there is some brutal scenes. Fando does treat Reese a little bit nastily at times. Again, I'm not going to go into spoilers. You can watch it yourself at some point and let me know what you think. But again, I think that's maybe where it falls down a little bit. The two central characters aren't as compelling as later characters would be in Jodorowsky films. But as a debut, as the kind of coalescing of his history, his influences, but also looking forward to where he was headed as far as these films, it's actually a fairly crystalline Jodorowsky piece. It's not perfect. I mean, you could argue no Jodorowsky film is completely perfect. But it's certainly well worth checking out. When it opened in Mexico at a festival, it caused a riot apparently, and one of Mexico's famous directors wanted to meet Jodorowsky and shoot him. It did very little business in America. It was cut. As Jodorowsky says himself, the company didn't really understand it, which, to be fair, isn't that, it's not that hard to understand why a company who's used to dealing with American mainstream Hollywood films would be a little bit confused by Fando release. But because his image of Hollywood growing up as a child was cowboy films, the fact that Fando and Lease didn't do very well was his reason for going back to Mexico and making a cowboy film, which I think we all know what that turned into. And I'll probably be discussing that in part 2 of the Jodorowsky series. So again, let me know if you've seen Fando Lease, what you think of it. But I was actually pleasantly surprised at how good it was. Again, it's not perfect, but it's full of amazing images, moments of genius, moments of frustration, but it's truly Jodorowsky. And again, very much like David Lynch, as I said, a Jodorowsky film is a Jodorowsky film, a David Lynch film is a David Lynch film. And of course the film was a huge inspiration on George Lucas, because Billy D. Williams' character is called Fando Calrissian, I believe. Is that not right? It's been a while since I've seen those films. I'm sure he's called Fando Calrissian. So it's a huge influence on George Lucas as well. So thanks very much for watching part 1 of the Jodorowsky journey. I apologise that I will not be able to explain Jodorowsky's cinema properly. But hopefully you'll bear with me for part 2. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, slightly confused, saying farewell.